What a wonderful day. And a wonderful 2 or 3 days. It's just been remarkable for me, and I thank you all. I couldn't thank you more. It's just impossible for me to describe what this means to me, and I hope to many children and families. I was just listening to the last remarks and the question of how we can look at what has happened, what we've said here, what has been done, what the people here represent in terms of actions over time, and push it out into the future. And it was very neat to end in that way, with pushing it into the future and asking, what does it look like 50 years from now? What do we want 50 years from now? And I'd like to do just the reverse in summary and talk about my beginning and how I never planned to be a psychiatrist or a public health person or to work in schools. That was not in my intent. I had planned to become a general practitioner in my hometown, general practitioner of medicine, and then saw my friends on a downhill course in life and asked, why? What's wrong? What's the matter? And it was that question that led me eventually into schools. And since I didn't know anything, I said yesterday, I didn't know anything about schools. I didn't know anything about education. I asked, and it was chaotic. You heard the description of the school that Linda Darling Hammond gave. It was chaotic. And so the only thing we could do was to bring the key people together and try and figure out how we make something good and something useful of this opportunity. And here's all this energy that's being played out in destructive and harmful ways. How can we turn it around and make it work for everybody? And as we began to do that, and the school began to change, and what we did first of all was to create this school planning and management team made up of the key people in the school. And as they began to work and solve problem after problem in the school, I was asked to speak at the synagogue, and they invited me to lunch. The head of the social affairs committee invited me to lunch. And I was so excited about what was beginning to happen and how the kids were performing and the parents were involved. And I went on with my excitement. He looked at me and he said, he's an old civil rights lawyer. He looked at me and he said, what makes you think that middle-class people want poor black kids to be as successful as their kids? It was like he had hit me with a brick. I said, what's he talking about? We all know that all kids have to succeed if we want to maintain a successful country and we want a real democracy. And it took me a long time. I didn't believe him. I rejected that viewpoint, that notion for many, many years. But I don't reject it anymore. And I also realized that it's more complicated than race and racism. It's human nature. And it has been played out in a certain way in this country because of its history, but it's human nature. And fear and anxiety and insecurity underlie the way we treat each other all the time. And that in order to counter that, we need to build systems that internally have the capacity to hold the negative parts of human nature in check, while the positive parts of human nature thrive. And then I realized in looking back is that that's what the school planning and management team did. It brought the people who had a commitment to creating something that was good and useful in that particular building together, and the guidelines and the principles were played out through that school planning and management team until it permeated the entire school and eventually had a positive impact on everybody, so that the fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty was pushed away, and the achievement and accomplishment and a good feeling was left. And when I was there on the first day, where we had the people who had come from all over the country got together, and I listened to the noise and the excitement and the stories and the joy that people had, and I realized that that is exactly what had happened. And the relationships had been created, and we had had experiences that made us realize the best in ourselves and the best in other people. And that is what the system that was created did. But I didn't create that system because I knew what I was doing. We created one piece after another in order to address one problem after another. And each problem addressed led to the opportunity to address the next problem, and the more complex problem, and the more challenging problem. But what it did was to help us realize that whatever the problem, as long as we were dealing with human beings, we could solve it if we put our heads together, and if we began and we continually work towards keeping the negative in check and promoting the positive. So that has brought us a long way, I think. And now the country, I think, is moving generally in that direction in education. But as mentioned, I think was the point about systemic change. And systemic change that goes beyond what we do in each and individual school, but what we do with the system of education, but recognizing that education does not stand alone. Education is part of the political system, it's part of the economic system, it's our overall social system, are all every day at play in what happens in education. And so we can't address all of those problems. We don't have our hands on the economic problems. We don't have our hands on the political problems. All we can do is keep going in trying to make every school building work for every child. And eventually, as it works, you begin to get the power to impact larger things. And as I said last night, I guess it was, so much has happened, crammed in, it seems like it was 2 weeks ago. But as I said last night, when I was asked to think about, I would just stand there and play act as I looked at those posters and the activities on the board, I began to think that and understand that all that we were doing with those first graders was preparing them to be successful adults and to be successful adult citizens. And that really is what education should be about, and we hope is about, where the model gets implemented as it should be. And then as we grow and as we gain strength, we can then begin to influence all the institutions around and connected to and parallel to our buildings and the people we serve. and begin to influence all of those systems so that they work to support education, and education works to support the people and the institutions around us. We're not going to solve the problems of education without changing the culture of the country. But we can change the culture. But by improving the performance of children and doing everything that is necessary to improve the performance of children, we will gradually improve the culture of the country. Because unintended, but it happens that way, is that systems change when people change, and people change when systems change, and we change systems by what we do with every child every day. And that's what this has been about. That's what these 2 days have been about. And we still, I think somebody said, I think Herman Clark said, I don't know the answer. We don't know the answer. What we know, that is, you keep pounding away at helping every child function well and creating the conditions that will enable every child to function well, we will eventually change the culture. And that's what I hope we are on the way to doing in helping social, emotional, academic development thrive. And if we can do that, we can create the better country that we all want. And I thank everyone in this room and everyone that's been a part of these 3 days, because you are the lead forces in transmitting what's necessary to change the world, and certainly to make America a better place, but to change the world. So I thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope you've had as good an experience and as good a feeling about what has happened here as I have. But thank you very much. Thank you.